How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Yes, yes. I'm sorry about that, bro. I was supposed to come, but I got caught up. I just want to say salute to everybody. How are you guys doing tonight? And
Good. How are
we're gonna
you?
have a great conversation.
Let's have one. I heard you're
This is
from
my
like the Brooklyn area.
No, I'm from Queens. I'm from
From
Queens.
Queens.
Yes, I'm from Queens. I'm from Queens.
I've got a guy that I'm doing a project with up there in that area that
Oh,
is pretty well known. I don't know if you know him or not, but Pistol
what's his
Pete,
name? Oh, Pistol P, Pistol P, Pistol. From the
Terror Squad.
Bronx. Terror
Yes,
Squad.
from
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Bronx.
know him. I know him. I know Pistol P. Yes, 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 yes.
Yes, that's my
Yeah.
guy. He's
Oh, yeah, yeah. He's cool peoples. He's cool peoples.
yeah, we're doing a project together.
Okay, okay. That's good. That's good. Um, I just want to say salute to everybody. I know there's a lot of people watching us, so I just want to say peace and blessings to everybody. My name is Bulletz Gotti. I have a YouTube channel called the Bulletz Gotti Show 2.0. Make sure y'all subscribe to it. I do a lot of interviews, whether it's street content, political, whatever type of content you like, I do it. So I just want to, give a little, reminder who I am.
right,
I'm
right.
glad
And
you did.
these are my friends. Amy, she's the one talking right now, and then my other friend Jennifer, she's muted right now.
Oh, hello,
Hey there.
Jennifer.
Hey
I
there.
spoke to Amy, but hi, Jennifer. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm very good. I'm very good. I'm very good.
It's Friday Eve, so there you
Yes,
go.
it is. Yes, it is.
And hey, just FYI, I'm a law professor, so if you ever need like, want to have law talk, we can talk. I'll talk all day long.
Oh, Amy, I would love to. In fact, I would love to bring you guys on my channel on YouTube, and we could have like one live stream we could do about law because I really want the people to understand the law. So I definitely would love to do that with you
You
guys.
know what? It's so funny you mentioned that because Pete has a podcast that he does, Dog in the Yard, and I started doing a little segment for him. It's like a 2 to 4 minute segment, and it's specifically geared towards like preventing younger people from going to prison and stuff like that and getting in trouble. It's about answering questions like, do you have to show your ID to the cops if you're a passenger
Yeah.
and they get pulled over? And things like if you're standing in the threshold of your house, that's considered public property. So the cops don't have to have a warrant to snatch you from right there. But if you're standing just right inside that threshold, it's a different story. And so it's just a matter of, those little nuances and knowing those things.
So true. So true. So true. A lot of people don't know their rights, and I think that'll be good to show people and let them understand, what rights do they have in the legal system.
Let's do it. I love talking about it. I'm a big advocate for juvenile prevention and all of that. I hate the juvenile system probably more than I hate the adult system. And that's because so many that start in the juvenile system end up in the adult system because it fails them.
That's so true. My cousin, he did 21 years. He died in 2019. He caught a case, and he was a juvenile. He was 16 years old, and they charged him as an adult. And in New York, we have something called the Willie Bostic law, where basically they charge if you do adult crimes, they charge you as an adult. They're trying to like stop charging juveniles as adults, but because of the politicians, and a lot of these juveniles are considered, adults because of the crimes that they commit, they're charging them every day. So I think it needs to change. I agree.
I believe it. When I was in law school, you are still a juvenile at 16. Um, when I was in law school, one of the things that I did was I worked as a court appointed special advocate or guardian ad litem, depends on what your state wants to call them. And in that case, yes, by law, you still are. I mean, it depends on what the thing is. But this kid, he was 15 years old and he was facing 2 life sentences. I do know the law. Um,
He's a law professor, by
anyhow,
the way.
I am a law professor. Um, anyhow, long story short, the kid, I was so concerned with it because nobody seemed to actually, care. So It made me sad. They actually told me at one point that they didn't want me to actually be able to, um, be able to testify for him in superior court because I should never know as much about a case like that. And I was like, but I'm supposed to be advocating in the child's best interest at all times. And it was really sad because I truly believed he was innocent 100% of everything. And they were just setting him up just to go down.
Damn.
That's interesting. But that's good. That's good to hear.
So before we start, I couldn't figure out how to fuck with my my settings. So an inmate keeps trying to call me. I'm just gonna keep hitting reject. So if I happen to like freeze for a few seconds, that's why. But I'll come right back because I just keep hitting reject every single time. They've called like 7 times in a row so far, but we can go ahead and start. So Bulletz, I want to first talk about Alpo today. Can you talk a little bit about Alpo, who he was, what he was all about? And after that, talk about the dude who killed him. And I believe he got off recently, right?
Yeah. So Alpo was a guy that came from a section of Harlem called the East Side. People call him El Barrio, Spanish Harlem. He started off as a stick-up kid, and he was learned the streets by a guy named Randy Love, who's still in prison. He's been in there since 1989, 1990. And this guy taught him the ropes of the streets. Alpo was working for a group of brothers named the Fowellen Brothers. It was 2 brothers. That's who he was hustling for. From there, he went into the West Side, but how he got to the West Side is by, this guy, Gangster Lou, who brought him over there to AZ and a place called a Jukebox. This is where Rich Porter and all them was hustling at. But Rich Porter never hustled for AZ, but that's just where they used to meet, hang out, call a Jukebox. And that's what, basically Alpo got a start. Alpo was a flashy guy. His style inspired a lot of rappers. The clothing wise, what he did with Dapper Dan, the shoes, the Timberland boots, the motorcycles and everything. Flamboyant guy. Likable guy, very likable. But he, was very, 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 very dangerous. You would see him with a smile on his face, but he was very calculated and very dangerous. And what happened to him, he left New York to go to D.C. And from D.C., that's where you hear the cases that he caught out there, the homicides, the people that he murdered, Demencio Benson from Brooklyn, who was from Crown Heights, Brooklyn, Michael Frey, who was from D.C., who was a known figure in D.C. He was bigger. He was before Rayful. He came from a whole era before Rayful Edmonds, who just was released. And a couple other people. He linked up with a guy named Wayne Perry, but how he met Wayne Perry was through a guy named Shorty Pop, who was a part of a group called a Junkyard Band, and they was a go-go group, and Shorty Pop was a part of that group. But how he got in the mix with DC guys was he was dealing with a girl named Inga, and Karen and Kim, and they brought him around the guys that was known in the city, and he met with a guy named Kurt Bone. He has a platform right now. And this guy named Fat Rodney, who was a rapper and a drug dealer. He was a rapper. He used to rap in the Go-Go's. And from there, he met, a guy named Andre Tank and this kid named Spark who's known as the Christ. And he met these 2 guys, and this was the guys that he was dealing with on a hustling level. From there, that's when he basically got in contact because he got shot in a community called the Trinidad's. It's a real dangerous community. And the guy that shot him was a guy named Joe Breaker, who was a known stick-up kid. So basically from there, he had to retaliate. He got with a group, and that's how he met Shorty Pop. And Shorty Pop introduced him to Wayne Perry, who was incarcerated. And when Wayne Perry got released, he put Wayne Perry down. And then the rest is history with, what happened in D.C. What happened, a lot of the murders and the body counts. But far as what happened to him is the murder that happened in Harlem. The guy that they say that killed him was a guy named, I think Shabuk, I think his name was. Something like that, Shabuk, I think that's how you pronounce his name. And he had a murder case before this whole Alpo case. Way before this, he was in an indictment, and the gun that they said that he murdered him with was used in another murder. And he was found, he was acquitted of the case. A lot of people have speculations that, he wasn't murdered, that he is back in the witness protection program. We don't know. It's just speculations, but a lot of people said they don't believe that he was murdered. They believe that he went back to witness protection. But before that situation, he had a deal with Mary J. Blige, who got him a deal for his life rights for a movie, I think a television series or a docu-series. And he had the help of Mary J. Blige and Sean P. Diddy Combs' children's mother, Misa, and they both helped him out. And he signed a deal for I think it was $4 million. $4 million, I think it was. So he was really trying to do things in the industry and to tell his story. That was really what he was trying to do in redemption.
Yeah, that's crazy. The Alpo story is real crazy to me because I always like to say he was like the African American Sammy the Bull, because he had 14 bodies on him, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 14 bodies. The ones in DC, they know about, the ones in Harlem, and it was more that he didn't talk about. But it's a lot of bodies. It's a lot of bodies that they said he had. You know about OG1, right? Jay-Z's guy. I don't know if you know.
Who is he?
So OG1 was basically Alpo's connect, and they told him because really before he told on Wayne Perry, it was two people that they really wanted. They wanted OG1 and they wanted Wayne Perry. But what happened was he never told on OG1, and OG1 never faced the time in that case. So he just went at Wayne Perry and Michael Jackson, who Michael Jackson was the one that killed Michael Frey, who was a worker for Michael Frey at the time.
Okay. That's crazy. Yeah, I know Jay-Z has a lot of connections in the streets and industry and stuff like that too.
Yeah. I want to say this though, because I really want to get to the other question. But what Alpo is, he's just one of those guys with Rich Porter that is and even Kenneth Supreme McGriff and Black Just. These are guys that are notable for their contribution in hip hop. The guys like LL Cool J and a lot of these rappers, later on put them in their songs because they were so connected to hip hop. So that's what it really was.
Right, and I'm glad you brought up Supreme, because I was telling Amy and Jennifer about a month and a half ago that was the guy that supposedly either shot 50 Cent 9 times or ordered the hit on 50 Cent 9 times. And can you talk a little bit about him and why he's important to the streets in New York and just in general?
So, like I was telling you before, we had a conversation about him. Supreme is a guy that came from Southside Jamaica, Queens. He's very known in that area. He's just a guy that I would say that had a lot of connections to the hip hop industry, from Murder Inc. to even early Def Jam. A lot of rappers came to his parties and performed. So he had a lot of ties with the who's who in hip hop. We talking about Tupac Shakur, Puffy, Suge Knight, everybody you want to name, they have had, dealings with Supreme. So he's a very notable guy, very famous guy. And because he's known throughout New York City, not just in Queens, but in Brooklyn, the Bronx, Manhattan, everybody knows Supreme. He's just a name. He has I would say he's like the Black John Gotti. He has a John Gotti type of appeal. He's known, his name is very big, and he was in the Daily News. He's known, this crew is very known. New Jack City, if you ever watched the movie, has took a lot from his crew. The whole jackets, they had the matching Supreme Team jackets. They took over whole projects and had, security in the projects. This is true story. They took down the whole Baisley projects. They had it controlled. Just like when you see Nino and the Carter, that was Supreme Team and Baisley projects. So he was a guy that had that type of effect in New York City. The closest thing to him is Nicky Barnes. When we talk about guys with a big major impact, black gangsters, I would say.
Right. Speaking of Nicky Barnes and Frank Lucas, can you talk a little bit about them and why they're so important to the New York streets and the history of New York?
Okay. So Nicky Barnes was a guy like Frank Lucas. Frank Lucas, he came from North Carolina, and he was a guy that his impact was he had a guy named Ike Atkinson who was a former sergeant in the military that was a big time drug connect, and he was getting drugs over from Vietnam. But it was by accident. It really wasn't him like he had a debt. It was a gambling debt that he had. And that gambling debt caused him to be a big smuggler in Vietnam from Vietnam to America. And Frank Lucas was able to get that plug because he was married. His cousin, or his sister actually, was married to Frank Lucas. That was Frank Lucas' wife. So that's how he was able to get that drug connection with Frank Lucas being an in-law. And he helped out Frank Lucas. Now with Nicky Barnes was a guy that he was a heroin addict. He started off using heroin. And from there, he met a guy named Matty Madonna, who his brother, Frank Madonna, they were big drug smugglers in the mob. So he, meeting him, having the connections with him, elevated him in the drug game. From there, he had another prison stint. He went to jail again. He got busted. When he got busted in the Bronx, he met Joey Gallo, the guy Crazy Joe. Everybody know Crazy Joe. Crazy Joe was the one that taught him about Machiavelli, Art of War. And so he, by having mentors like Matty Madonna, Joey Gallo, he advanced himself in the criminal organization. Like a lot of drug crews around those times weren't organized like how his crew was, because his was kind of structured like the mafia. You know, they all had underbosses, bosses. And from there, so the council, before the council, they were the Untouchables. And there was a guy named Goldfinger, Jimmy Terrell, and a guy, Melvin Combs, who was Puffy's father. They had a crew called Untouchables, so they all was partners. So when Jimmy Terrell went to jail and Puffy's father died, Melvin Combs was killed, you know, and all the guys that was in the Untouchables, they all went to jail. Frank Matthews disappeared. They said he was killed. And a lot of those guys that was a part of it, Walter Grant, Jesus Christ, these are guys that were a part of this Untouchables movement. Nicky Barnes got guys that he was locked up with. Frank James, who was a known stick-up kid. Jazz, who was also a heroin addict. Gaps, a lot of these guys. Guy Fisher was a part of the council. And he put all these guys together, seven bosses. So it was 7 bosses. They all had their individual crews in the council. And he had his nephew. He had, you know, other people that was involved. And he was this guy that structured a whole organization. They weren't just in New York. They were in Detroit. They were in Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. They were $100 million drug organization, you know, and he was the richest man in New York at that time. What happened to Nicky Barnes was he went to jail, which it really didn't have anything to do with him because he didn't get caught. It was his co-defendants that got caught, what was Jazz Hayden and a guy named Wally Rice. They had got caught. So when they got caught, he basically thought that Guy Fisher was going to throw the trial out for him, you know, which he did not. And he had a little disdain for Guy Fisher. And then when he found out that Guy Fisher and a guy named Tito Johnson, who was an underling in his crew, was sleeping with 2 of the women that he was dealing with. What happened was he wanted the guy Frank James and the other guys in the council to have these men killed. When they did not take the orders of the murder, he eventually just said, you know what? I'm just going to cooperate. He was the first initial boss around that time to do that because nobody else did that. So when Nicky Barnes did that, a lot of other people flipped. Just like with the Sammy the Bull thing. It was like, because the first time you seen somebody flip like that was Valachi, right? And Valachi did that because Vito Genovese thought that he was the one that told on him and why he got incarcerated, which he wasn't. He did not tell on Vito Genovese. He was really a solid man doing his time. But because he thought that he was the one that turned on him when it was Lucky Luciano and Carlo Gambino, and in the situation with Nicky Barnes, he had no choice. He had to do what he had to do. And in that case, it translated to the case with Gene Gotti, Mark Ryder, and his nephew Mike Mellon, who also caught a case in the late 80s in 88, which it was connected to the council case in 83 that took down the council. So Nicky Barnes is a very important figure. His story is very important. It's a sad story because it was a brotherhood that turned into, the king killing all his members.
Okay, so I just have a question. Why is this not a TV show?
It's crazy. A lot of people wanted to touch. Will Smith was supposed to do something with Netflix, but I don't know what happened. But it is a story that should be on the TV. It should be a TV show, just like The Godfather of Harlem, because it's a very important story. There's a lot of people that's connected to the story. It has connections to Hollywood, the music industry, the Apollo, because the money that put up for the Apollo was Nicky Barnes' money. So it has a lot of connections to the mafia and everything. And it definitely should be a movie or a story.
Wow.
And mentioning Frank Lucas, everybody that's listening, and I'm sure you guys have seen American Gangster, that was based off of his life, which was a really crazy movie. And is it true that he actually killed his own cousin after he caught him doing what he was doing?
Yes. That's true. That's true. Frank Lucas' crew was a very dangerous crew. His crew, the Country Boys, was a very dangerous crew. They were killers. They were in Queens. They was in New Jersey. They were in New York. They were strong, very strong crew. But they call themselves the Country Boys. And if you watch the movie American Gangster, that's what they were. They were protectors of Frank Lucas, and they stood with him.
Yeah, that's one of my top 5 true crime movies, like, of all time. That, The Godfather, Goodfellas. There's so many good ones, but American Gangster is one of the top ones for me.
I've never seen The Godfather or Goodfellas.
Really? You've never seen The Godfather? That's crazy.
Godfather's a good movie. It's a good movie.
I really haven't.
Yeah.
I've seen it probably at least 10 times.
All right, I'll watch it.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I
Yes.
love all the mafia movies.
Yeah, I love all the mafia movies. I've talked to a few mafioso guys back in the day, and yes, pretty.
Yeah, you know something about The Godfather. It's a very good story. I read the book. Mario Puzo. It's a great book, and the movie is very great because the story of family. It shows you family, politics, not just the gangster stuff, because it doesn't just glorify gangster stuff. And the crazy thing about the story that a lot of people don't know, the mob, a lot of mafia figures are in that movie, The Godfather. If you watch it closely, the guy that played Luca Brasi was a actual mafia member, and Joe Colombo stopped production because they didn't want the depiction of the mob to be in a negative light, just the Italian community in a negative light. So the movie was stopped for like a couple weeks until they got the script right and everything, and they came to an agreement.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they didn't want to get themselves whacked or whatever. I can completely understand that. So you were talking a little bit ago about the 7 bosses of New York, right? Would that basically be like in comparison to the mafia? Like, I mean, because the mafia had different bosses and different underbosses and consigliers, or however you say it. Would that be like similarities to that?
Yeah, it's kind of like that because around those times, a lot of those guys that were heroin dealers in the 60s and 70s, the black bosses, they came in with 7 bosses. So, like I said, the guy Jimmy Terrell, Melvin Combs, Frank Matthews, Frank Lucas, Nicky Barnes, Hollywood Hegler, Walter Grant, Willie Abrams. These are guys that were all in this round table, the Untouchables. So they were considered the Black Mafia. And they had a whole segment in the Daily News with all of their pictures and their mugshots in it. So they were showing all the seven bosses of New York City in just the black underworld. So it was kind of structured like the mafia, you could say.
So what was their biggest downfall? You would say, like who or what was their biggest downfall when it came down to it?
Jealousy, envy, a lot of them dealing with each other's women, people backbiting, and no type of loyalty. I think what the mafia has when it comes to black organized crimes is that the mafia has a pecking order and a structure. And a lot of times, yes, you have people that go against the structure, but if you listen to the ones that tell, they understand what they did. They understand omerta. They understand why they were made. But the problem is that a lot of times the feds, and it's Sammy the Bull's case, right? He would never tell on John Gotti if he never heard a recording, and pictures. A lot of these guys, it's the same story, but in black organized crimes, it's just the guy is when he's supposed to do something to help out, he's not. Like what I just said about Nicky Barnes and Guy Fisher. Guy Fisher was supposed to pay off the jury to work in Nicky Barnes, Guy Fisher, and the other guy's favors. He didn't do that. He just let it work in his favor, and that he got a mistrial and nobody else did. So that was where the animosity came from, that they didn't take care of the guys. And in the mafia, you have to take care of the guy that's in the family, because if you don't do that, that's a violation in the code of omerta.
So typically when in mafia, right, you had to get permission to kill somebody, like, and then they typically normally didn't, and there would be backlash for that, right? So in the black mafia, would you have to do that? Would you have to get permission to kill this guy, or did you just go ahead and do it and just deal with the repercussions?
They just go ahead and do it and deal with the repercussions. It's not the same type of, like, I think a lot of times when you really look at these movements, a lot of these guys, especially like Fat Cat Nichols, right? I'm gonna give him like an example. When he was in prison, the guys that were in his organization made orders that he never agreed to. Like the thing with the parole officer, the thing with the cop, Edward Burns. They just did these things on their own. And it wasn't an order given down by him. It was an order given down by somebody that was under him. So that right there just shows you there's not a structure in the mob. You have to get an okay from the boss or from the higher ups in the council. Because when you go there to the table, the round table where everybody in there talking and the commission, somebody has to say yes and somebody has to say no. And if the whole commission says no, then you have to stand down. You can't go against the commission order. And this is why I say in these organizations, they went against the orders of the boss. And now the whole organization is done. They could cripple a whole organization. In the mob, you could take one boss and lock him up, but there's a boss that's in the wings that'll take the place of that boss. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That makes sense.
I was just going to ask, how did this affect, like, I guess, like the drugs and stuff that were coming in and out of the area? Because I can tell you that one story that I heard about is the story of Boy George Rivera.
Oh
You know what I'm talking about?
yeah. I know Boy George. My step pops was supposed to be on that boat with Boy George, the yacht where he had the party where he was giving the Rolexes. He's supposed to be, but he had missed it. So that story, we could talk about that.
That's a good one, because I just learned about that one like in the past few months. And I mean, you're talking about, this is a teenager, who's coming up and being able to do this. And it's just kind of odd to me, because you're talking about this power dynamic that exists with the mafia, and you've got this black mafia, and then you've got him being able to do this. And I have no idea how this overlap even works.
Yeah. So let me say this, Amy. Boy George, he was a young guy. He was like 17 years old. He only had like a 3-year run, actually. He
made enough money in that 3 years.
He made enough money in a 3-year run. Like he started out, he got successful in 87, and by 89 they came and got him. And And it all happened so fast because he had a big yacht party and he had the who's who, performing for him. Big Daddy Kane, everybody. He gave all his members of his crew Rolexes. And the funny thing about his case is that everybody that was the waiter, the chef, the people that was telling the people to come on the yacht were all federal agents. And he made a lot of money. His house, he had a house in, I think, Puerto Rico, a mansion in Puerto Rico, and Calvin Klein did the Obsession commercial in one of his houses. And I think it was 90 or 89, I think it was. But they did a commercial in his house. He was the guy that first started the stash box because there was nobody doing the stash box thing before him. So he took something that we know from James Bond and he did it for himself. So he was an interesting guy. He loved the box. He used to train at Gleason's gym. He was a guy that was poor. He was very poor. He was abused. He was sexually abused. He has a story. It's a good book that talks about his life. I'm gonna recommend it for you guys. I forgot the name of the book, but after I probably sent it to you, Andrew, and you probably sent it to them. It's a good book. It talks about him, his personal life, and him as a child. But he rose to power very fast. A lot of people can't say they had that same story. Another guy that I want to compare that was just like Boy George is a guy named Tommy Mickens. They call him Tommy Montana. The IRS got him. Both of these guys were two guys that had a fast rise in the drug game, and they only had like a 3-year run. And they did so much in that 3-year run. I mean, these guys were driving Ferraris, Porsches, Lamborghinis.
And Boy George also had like 50 people on his payroll.
50 people. He had 50 people on his payroll. He just was a guy that he copped from a guy in Chinatown, a guy named Onion Head. That was his connect. You probably heard of him, Machine Gun Johnny. That was the guy that he copped from. He was also Fat Cats Connect, and he made a lot of money. His story is kind of sad because he was young, and they should give him his freedom because he was locked up during the old law, the 101 law, and he should have been released before that because a lot of people that was under that guidelines are now coming home. One of his co-defendants is a guy named Bob Lemon, who basically was a part of the crew Obsession, and he just came home like in 2020. So I was kind of figuring out why he's not able to come home, but I heard that he had reoffended in jail, so that's probably why. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, but he was, when I started looking into him, I was like, good Lord, he was like 19 years old. He was making, he was bringing in like $500,000, in money. And I was like, on a regular basis, paying these 50 people and doing all of this. And see, the only other youthful offender like that I had heard of was White Boy Rick. And White Boy Rick, there's nothing on Boy George. It's crazy.
Yeah. He was definitely a youthful offender, and just like White Boy Rick. But Boy George was, I would say, big time, and he was just making a lot of money.
Oh yeah. I don't know if you've met White Boy Rick, but he's interesting too.
Yeah. I know about White Boy Rick. His story is very interesting because he was used by the federal agents. And they basically wanted him to get information on the Curry brothers and the Best Friends. The Best Friends was very dangerous in Detroit. They were a very murderous organization. You had Maserati Rick, Demetrius Holloway, who was also murdered in 1990, Maserati Rick in 1988. And they were like the big deals in Detroit. And White Boy Rick was the guy that was supplying them guys. So it's a crazy situation. His story is very crazy. His movie doesn't do what his documentary done. I'm not going to lie here.
I can tell you his documentary doesn't do justice either.
You didn't like his documentary?
Uh, listen, I know Sean Retch too, so I don't want to talk smack about Sean Retch, but I met Rick last year, and so I was going to help him write his story because that was the one thing he was talking about. He was, tired of people basically making money off of his story, and him getting nothing from it. And so I was like, well, I can help you with that. And so, but I had met him right at the time that he got that domestic violence charge. So it might have been earlier in the year. Oh gosh, it might have even been later in 2023. But he was, I mean, later in 2022, but he was waiting for that to kind of, go over. And then, he's been focused on his weed line and all of that. But he's an
He has
interesting
like a
guy.
weed business, right?
Yeah, he does. I think
He
it's called
has
like
like
the
a weed
eighth.
business right now, right?
Yeah, the eighth, I think is
I
what it's
know
called.
I know he was like a road, like Kid Rock had him like his road manager because him and Kid Rock was like best friends. Like they grew up together, him and Kid Rock. So Kid Rock gave him like a situation, and then he got into the weed business. I follow him a lot on IG. I see what he's been doing, Amy.
Is that why he's driving a Lamborghini?
Yeah. Kid Rock helped him out when he came home. Like he was
Mm,
the only one that supported him really, because Kid Rock was the one that pushed for the movie and the documentary and all the other things, and then the free White Boy Rick campaign. So he's really been supportive of White Boy Rick.
interesting. We didn't get to that part. We did talk about how he knows the Wahlbergs because that was an overlap in our conversation. One of the projects that I'm doing has been optioned by the Mark Wahlberg.
Oh, Mark Wahlberg got an interesting story. He has an interesting story. Marky Mark.
Love Marky Mark. Love him. Um,
What's the story?
he was in prison when he was, I mean,
He was
like
in prison
earlier
as a
on.
teenager. Yeah,
Great.
You don't remember that?
yeah. He was
I,
in,
I
like
forgot
before
about that.
before he became Marky Mark, the rapper. He was in prison, and that basically from there, he started his rap career because his brother was in New Kids on the Block. Donnie Wahlberg. So
Oh, yes. We know him. Listen, you're talking about like two Gen X girls who grew up with these boys, and
Oh, yeah. We were older though.
oh, so cute. Just saying.
I
Um,
still love Marky Mark. I still love him.
oh, I do too. He's still one of my favorite actors.
Yeah, he's
His
great.
his comedy is very underrated. Um,
Absolutely. I totally agree with that.
oh, I was going to tell you. Oh, so what am I supposed to call you? Bulletz Gotti? Bulletz Gotti?
yeah,
What do you want me to call you?
Bullets is cool.
All right. Just thought I would ask. While we were sitting here talking, um, I I sent Pete a message. Is it okay if I hook you two up? Because I think you guys could do a fun podcast together.
Oh yeah. Pete is cool. I like Pete. Yeah, we definitely could do something.
Okay. He told me it was fine to hook y'all up.
What was that comment earlier, Amy? I can't scroll up. Something about Kendrick Lamar and
Oh,
Mad
yes,
City.
yes. Yeah. Somebody asked if it was like Kendrick Lamar's lyrics in Mad City.
Yeah. It was Morgan.
Let me see. Where is it? Oh, she said, were things like Kendrick Lamar's song Mad City? That's for you, Bullets, because I can't answer that.
Oh, Kendrick Lamar. Oh,
No, she said, what were things in general, like were they like his lyrics in Mad
well,
City?
yeah. It was. Especially like the crack era. It was very violent. You had a lot of. I would say like 86, 87 is when the guns went from Colt 45s to Mac 11s and Uzis and Tech 9s, and 9 millimeters. And everybody had guns. Before that, I would say like 82, 83. A lot of people didn't have the artillery that they was getting in 85, 86, 87 because you had the Colombians, the Dominicans, and the Jamaicans who came to New York City, and not just New York, but just said everywhere, like Philadelphia, Boston, and they was just going crazy, with these submachine guns. Even the police officers had to change their guns from 38s to 44s to 9mm handguns, Glocks. It was that how dangerous it was. So yeah, it was just like those lyrics.
So Bullets, I interviewed a dude by the name of Jimmy Wynn from the BTK gang, the Born to Kill gang. Do you know anything about them?
Yeah. They were like a Vietnamese. They was Vietnamese. They were from Vietnam, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. What do you know about them? About Lan Tran and David Ty and all them?
Yeah, those guys were very big because it was the Ghost Shadows. It was, a lot of those Triad gangs and Born to Kill. That was a real dangerous crew. In fact, there's a story, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if he was I think he was the guy. He was in prison and he beat up like all of the correctional officers in Rikers Island. And they beat up the Turtles too. Like these guys was like known Asian gangs, and a lot of those Asian gangs were dangerous. You ever seen a movie? It's a movie called I think it's Yeah the Dragon. It's with Mickey Rourke. Like if people ever seen that movie, that was like the basis. And even Corruptor, if you ever seen a Corruptor with Chow Yun-Fat and Mark Wahlberg, like that movie was the basis of what Chinatown was in those times. And a lot of those gangs, those Chinese, Vietnamese gangs, were very dangerous. They were also dangerous. A lot of fights with knives and guns and whole lot of things. These guys would, especially in the late 80s, they were doing a lot of craziness in that Chinatown area.
What about the other Pistol Pete with what is it?
Oh, Sex Money Murder, Pistol Pete.
Yeah, that one.
So Peter Rolock was a guy that was from the Soundview area in the Bronx. His father was a part of Nicky Barnes' crew, actually. He was a part of the council. And then he was a part of the crew that was after the council, which was with Gene Gotti, Mark Ryder, and Nicky Barnes' nephew, Mike Mellon. And he was a guy that had connections into the music industry. His father, Keith Sweat, was a guy that was their artist. They put him into the industry. He was a guy that basically was a boxer. He was a trained boxer too. And he was also into the Black Power movement, but he got into the drug game because it was big around that time. And he went to jail in 87, 88. And his son, who was, played basketball, actually. He played basketball. And from basketball, he got into the drug game in the late 80s, the time his father was in jail. And he started off a crew called Sex Money Murder, which was basically a crew that was just a drug organization. It wasn't even a gang organization. It was just a drug crew with guys from the neighborhood Soundview. And from there, he was a guy that was on the rise. And he had a situation with a kid named Carlton Hines, which was known as C-Town. He was a basketball player. He was known in the street basketball, very popular at Rucker Park. And he was like a huge in the heroin trade. And he came from a section in the Bronx called Cortlandt Avenue. And him and Pistol Pete had a altercation at a place called Skate Key. It was a skating ring, discotheque, and a lot of young people went there to party. And it was a situation with him and the kid Carlton Hines where they had a disagreement. And he knew Carlton Hines because they played ball together. They played basketball at Rucker. But he didn't know that he was, a hustler like him. So, a lot of people can, turn you away very nonchalantly. And he turned him away in an aggressive manner, which turned into a fight, which ended up them wanting to go with guns, but the guys left. So he held it in, because Pistol, he already made his name in hustling trade. And with this right here, he had to make his name in the murder game. And from there, he killed Carlton Hines first. And from Carlton Hines, it was other people that was murdered. A guy named Anthony Brown, that was Haitian Jack's partner. They owned a barber shop. He was also murdered. Another guy named Carlos, who was basically with Carlton Hines, and he went and did an interview with Stephen A. Smith, who at the time was working for the Daily News, and he identified Pistol Pete in the Daily News. And from there, he was murdered not too long ago. Then there was a guy named Samuel B.O. Barnes, who was a known guy. He was a known guy in the Bronx. He was like a strong man, known for, with the guns, extortion, and things like that. And he also was murdered, but he wasn't murdered by Pistol. He was murdered by a guy named Twin. Pistol Pete, he was on the streets. Another guy, Amy, that had a short run because he wasn't on the streets that long. He came his name, got his name big in 92, 93, 94. And then by 95, he got arrested. He got arrested in Grant's Tomb, actually, and it was during Harlem Week. And he was in his car and he saw this female, and he got out the car and somebody identified him and saw him, and the cops caught him. He got arrested, and the rest is history. He went to jail, and later on he caught a federal case, and the supermodel Tyson Beckford almost got caught up in that case with Pistol Pete, but he really wasn't involved in the murder thing. Him and Pistol Pete was doing a record company. They was trying to start a record company because of the relationships that his father had in the music business. So Pistol Pete was very influential in the Bronx. He was very big. He was a guy that was young. He was young just like Boy George. He was only 17, 18 years old. And he rose very fast to power in the Bronx.
That's so weird because it's like him and the other one overlap.
Yeah. It's like three Pistol Petes. Like he is him, the Spanish one is Pistol Pete from Soundview, and then there's another Pistol Pete. I think he's from the Bronx or Queens, so it's like three Pistol Petes.
There's one that I was told is Ocean Heights or something like that.
Yeah. That's the one. Yeah, it's like three of them.
Whenever I first started working with mine, we'll call him mine because I don't know the other two.
I hear you.
When I first started working with him and I was going to be doing the bits for his podcast, I had some of my my students that I had worked with at another school that did like film and stuff like that. I was getting them to help me with the bits because I didn't know how we were going to actually do it. And we were kind of putting together some little pieces. And one of my students is from up there, and he pulls me to the side and he goes, "Miss Amy, you sure you really want to work with that guy?" I said, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "He did really bad things." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he was like, "Murder and stuff like that." And I said, No, you got the wrong one. I was like, "That's not him." And he was like, okay. He's like, "Because I was sitting here worried about you."
That the black one is very notable. Like he has a history. Hey, you know something about him also? While he was incarcerated, he wrote like 3 children's books. Denouncing gang life. Yeah, he wrote 3 children's books denouncing gang life. He's really like. He's against the gang stuff. He's been in there. He's in Florence ADX. He's in there with Larry Hoover and a lot of those guys. He's been there since like I think 2005 or 6. I think 2005, 2006. He got there. So he's been holding on strong.
I didn't know he was over there.
Yeah. He's been there for a minute. Yeah.
What you think about Larry Hoover?
You know who else wrote a children's book? Yeah, Larry Hoover, too. The children's book while in prison was Stanley Tukey Williams, who was executed in California, the supposed founder or co-founder of the Crips. And even when he was executed, Snoop Dogg was even there protesting his execution, which I thought was kind of crazy.
Yeah. That's so true. They was trying to I think Snoop was trying to get Arnold Schwarzenegger to take him off of parole, death row.
To commute it.
Yeah, to commute it, but they just didn't because the crime was so heinous. So the death row just happened.
Right. Yeah,
Morgan
that's a crazy
asked.
story in itself.
Morgan asked, were the guys that had families left alone, or did it not matter whether you had kids or not?
During those times, it was so like violent that they really. I'm gonna say this, right? People did have a balance, like to leave the women and kids alone, but a lot of those guys, it was just so much going on that they just didn't care. It's just like Griselda Blanco. She murdered a lot of children and even women, and it just like they didn't care. It was just the bloodthirst.
Right. Well, I mean, I would say that in light of that, I mean, if we want to get to semantics, this was their family,
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true.
So, I mean, even though you have like a biological family, but this was their family too.
That's so true. That's so true. I can't disagree with you on that.
So to round us out, Bullets, can we talk about the 9 Trey Gangsters, Tekashi 6ix9ine, and that whole mess? The main cast of characters, like how Tekashi caught his case, the whole kidnapping and all that bullshit.
Okay.
Can you talk about all that?
Okay, so the 9 Trey Gangsters was like the first original blood set in New York City. It started in 1993. The guy that was the OG of that is a guy named Magoo, who was a Latin King member. He was a Latin King, and I think the guy Frank White was also like a Latin King. I think he was too. But there was a guy by the name of S.I. who wrote a book called Treyway. And he was like the youngest member of the 9 Trey Gangsters because he was a juvenile. And he was just, he had just the leadership skills to lead people that they made him a high-ranking OG. And he was he caught a federal case also. And he was released from the feds, and he was pushing his book called Treyway. And it was basically, I wouldn't say denounce gangs, but it was like supposed to be like a positive book of a guy changing his life from the gangs. Tekashi 6ix9ine, and let me just fast forward rewind a little bit too. The guys that was with Tekashi 6ix9ine was a guy named Mel Murder. He was a rapper who was with Jim Jones, and for years he was with him. Jim Jones, who also is a member of 9 Trey Gangsters. But Tekashi 6ix9ine met these guys by a guy named CEO Chris, who was a guy that was infiltrated not just only the 9 Trey Gangsters, but he infiltrated Denver Lanes, Mac Ballers, Crips, Latin Kings, all of this. And he was associated with the 9 Trey Gangsters. He took Tekashi 6ix9ine to a guy named Seiko Billy. Seiko Billy, who uncle, dude named Shano, was like the top guy in 9 Trey Gangsters and a couple other, people. So he was running around with Tekashi 6ix9ine, him and Billy Otto. What happened was Tekashi 6ix9ine did a video for a song called Cuda. And they did the video in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brownsville area. They shot the video. The guy Shotty introduces himself to 6ix9ine. He runs around. He kicks Seiko Billy and Billy Otto out. And he's running around. Him and Seiko's uncle, Mel Murder, is running around with Tekashi now. Now they becoming, and there was a guy named Harv and a guy named Nuke that was running around with Tekashi. All these guys was running. What happened was Tekashi 6ix9ine paid these guys $89,000 each. Gave them $89,000. He paid them very well, changed their life, and all this. Mel Murder was living with his baby mother, and he was able to buy a house. Shotty was sleeping on a couch in the pound, and he was able to have a penthouse, you know? So these guys Shotty was on the run, actually, for a drug case in Jersey. So he was able to change these dudes' lives so they could be able to have a situation for their families. The wrong mistake that happened with these guys was that they weren't business minded. And they had control of an artist, right? A lot of people like to say 6ix9ine, 6ix9ine, but I always say that if Shotty never went to, you know, to Mr. Childs and had the argument that he had with Elliot Grange, they would never have a federal case. He put the attention. This guy was on the run for a year. He was on the run. While he was running around with Tekashi, this man had a whole drug case in Jersey. So him doing that, having a guy Crippy come in, they hit the security in the head with the chair, and all the nonsense that they was doing was just stupid. They took the kid on a robbery spree at This Is 50. They robbed the guy. They put the stuff in his house, in Tekashi's house, because Tekashi still lived in Brooklyn. He did not move from where he was living. Him and his girlfriend lived in the same house in Brooklyn. You know, they shared that apartment together. He wasn't able to move until he came home. But Tekashi was an interesting case because he was a guy that had a good heart, that really wanted to help these guys out. What happened was they took his kindness for weakness, and because he denounced them, they wanted to harm him, you know, and that's what happened. But he helped out these guys, man, and, you know, they would have never seen the light of day if it wasn't for Tekashi 6ix9ine. Just the whole thing with the non-trade, it's a whole lot of, with a lot of this blood stuff in New York, it's a whole lot of betrayal, and it's just a whole lot of, you know, backbiting. And they had internal beef, you know, like with Shotty having issues with Nuke and Harv, Mel Murder having issues with Nuke and Harv. It was all a beef going on. So it wasn't like both of them want 6ix9ine, but 6ix9ine went with the side that he was comfortable with. That was Shotty, Mel Murder. He didn't go with the side of Nuke and Harv. And they had beef over that. Like when he got kidnapped, after that, it was a shootout in Smurf Village, where basically both of these guys were shooting at each other. So there's a whole lot of things going on internally, you know, robberies amongst each other. So it was betrayal. It was bound. What happened to them was bound to happen because there was no loyalty there, you know.
Interesting. I know that the very first episode that Pete put me in was with Drama from that.
Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, he was one of them, one of the co-defendants. I don't think we can. I know that we said that let's talk about them, but I don't think we can talk about New York and gangs and stuff like that and not mention MS-13.
Yeah. MS-13.
One of my students, his sister was Vanessa Argueta, and her and her 2-year-old were executed in New York by MS-13, and it was a really.
It was in Long Island, if I'm not mistaken, right, Amy?
I don't know. It might have been, but there were 4 of them, and 3 of them left the country. 2 of them were found in like Ecuador, and then the other guy ended up on the top 10 most wanted, and they found him in like Nicaragua and brought him back.
Yeah.
But they are something else.
You know something, MS-13, like when they first came to New York, because they were big in Jersey. I don't know if you're familiar with the case. I forgot the name of the girl, but her and her friends had got killed. It was in Newark, New Jersey. MS-13 was very, very big in the Virginia area, DC area. And then they quickly came into New York, New Jersey, and Long Island, to be exact. And they have they very dangerous. They've killed a lot of people in Long Island, man. It's like, there was one case with these 2 young girls, they got killed by them. and they it's like machete killing, like chopping up bodies, heads, dismemberment. There was this girl, she set up, I forgot her name. She just got found, she was found guilty, but they just gave her time. I forgot her name. But she lured
Oh, the
these
one
two
that
guys.
lured them.
Yeah, lured them. She was a big
Yes.
MS-13 member, and she lured them. And these guys are vicious, you know. Another gang I could compare to them that's very vicious also, that people don't talk about, is the Trinitarios. Very, very vicious, very dangerous. They're just like the Latin Kings and the Nietas. They do machete killings, just like MS-13, and they're very vicious. The only thing, MS-13s is not in the cities, like they're not in the 5 boroughs, but they're big in Long Island. They're very big in Long Island. Like I'm talking about from Nassau to Suffolk. They're very big, and they're very big in Jersey. You know, they're very big out there.
Jen, the reason that they used for Vanessa and Diego was that they were disrespected. If I'm not mistaken, the girl who lured them also said the same thing, that it
Yeah,
had something to do with them being disrespected.
yeah. That's what it is. And
Did they kill her baby?
Yes, they executed them, both of them.
yeah, I don't know if you
Jesus.
guys familiar with the case. It was a case in Virginia where this girl was killed by MS-13. It was on gangland like quite a few years ago, and she was pregnant, and they killed her. They slaughtered her. They cut her up, and took the unborn baby out of her body and chopped it up. Like it's crazy, man.
They're brutal.
What reason?
Yes.
What reason did they have to do that?
It's just brutal. They don't care, Jen. They just don't care. These guys are very brutal.
Wild.
That's
But
why my student's been wanting to do he's been wanting to like have a documentary done on his sister, and his family is like scared to death because, you know, even though those 4 guys are on the inside, they still have people on the outside, and you know, his
yeah.
family's not convinced that they would not be, you know, harmed in any way, shape, or form. I mean, they're scary.
But you know something, Amy, in a lot of those third world, Central American countries, and even in South America, that's just how they operate. Like in Colombia, Nicaragua, Ecuador, that's just how they operate. Like they just kill whole families. This is why these people come here to America to escape from these gangs, because those gangs control the prison system. The cartels control Mexico, and the gangs control El Salvador. Like they control that, like literally.
And if I'm not mistaken, MS-13 is connected to the Mexican cartel as it is.
Yeah, they are.
And
They are.
I've been told that they're notorious for not caring who they kill. That if they have, you know, if there's like 5 people and only one of them is guilty, they'll just go ahead and kill all 5 of them to make sure that they get the one.
That's a fact. That's a whole fact. Like they just is violent and brutal, you know, and that's just how they are, you know. That's just how they are. Like a lot of people, if they really look at them, like when they do machetes, that's how they fight with machetes, you know. Like the kid Junior that got killed by the Trinitarios, like that's what they do. They come with machetes and chop you. Like it's sad, you know, but this is how they operate.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, this was good.
Yeah, we appreciate it. It's always good talking to you, and I still have that unreleased interview that I'm going to release here in like a month and a half, 2 months.
Oh, thank you, man. I want to say this. You know, I like having these type of conversations because, you know, I'm into true crime, and, you know, even though I talk about criminal crimes also, but I talk a lot of true crime things. And like one case that I'm going to do a project on is I want to do like maybe like a series on my channel. Is the Scott Peterson case. I followed that for years.
Yes. What do you think about it? What's your opinion?
So, in my opinion, with that case, it's like this, right? when I watch some of the documentaries that I've been seeing, it's looking that he may be innocent in the case, and I'm going to tell you why I think. It's because they said that his wife was a witness of a robbery next door that was going on, and these two guys, they said was in the van, murdered her. So when I watch a lot of these cases like Scott Peterson and many others, when you see a lot of these Netflix shows, they basically break down a lot of these cases for you to see that these guys really got railroaded. And it's sometimes in these cases, it looked like they were the bad guys, but when you start seeing the lack of evidence that weren't showed in the trial, the lack of the alibis, the witnesses that they denied to have on the case, that just shows you that if it's not for social media and it's not for Netflix and Amazon Prime and Peacock, wherever they do these documentaries, and you start seeing that these cases were cases that should have been investigated properly. A lot of police officers and prosecutors, they just want a quick conviction to basically just solidify their profile, because a lot of them turn into politicians. They become judges. So they want to make their portfolio huge by getting a conviction. They don't care that the person that they convicted may be innocent. They just want a conviction because, oh, you had a problem with your wife and you were cheating on your wife, or oh, you had an argument with this guy and you just did this and we're just going to convict you. I just think that's wrong. I think that if you're going to do a case, investigate it point by point and see if they are guilty. Just don't go with, okay, somebody's saying this and, oh, he said this and yes, he's guilty. I just think that's wrong.
Well, do you know the Atlanta child murders case?
Yes. Yeah. You want to know something, Amy? I'm going to tell you, my cousin was actually a reporter for CBS in Atlanta around those times. And he also said that he believed that he was innocent in that case, that he didn't do those murders to those
Shut
people.
up. Wayne Williams.
Awesome. Yeah.
Wayne Williams is I'm very close to Wayne. He is I think he's innocent of that too, but that was a good example of how you summed up saying these other cases in politics and stuff like that. I think his is a classic example of all of that, just wanting to get your profile. John Douglas came out and said it could only be a black man, because the white people would stand out in the neighborhood and things like that. And I think that he's the perfect example of that definition.
Amy, that case, and you know something about that case, Amy, like, because me and my cousin was talking about this like a couple years ago when he was here. He just went back overseas. And when we had the conversation, because I had watched the Wayne Williams documentary on HBO, and just the way they did that case was it was sloppy. Like, they didn't investigate the case right. They just wanted to put it on him because he was a photographer and a lot of other things. But I just felt that he was not the guy that did those things. And it just didn't, like they said, the way the kids, they said the neck was snapped, all type of stuff that was going on. It just didn't make any sense to me.
No.
Listen, I have a theory that some of them were the product of paramedics. And I will stand by that. Yeah. I will die on that hill. I will die on it.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Next time we talk, can we talk about Sean Combs?
Oh yeah, sure. We could definitely do that. We could definitely do that.
Whole time. I would love to spend the whole night talking about him.
Yeah, especially the Tupac conspiracy too, because I know that there's been a lot of talk lately about Diddy ordering the hit on him, and then there's proof like in the streets that it happened, and there's not proof in the courts that it happened. So I'm curious about that myself too, because I love Tupac.
Yeah,
let's
plan that. Let's plan that, Andrew, please.
All right, yeah, for sure.
Can we talk about Suge Knight too?
Yeah, Suge Knight is a good one to talk about too. I mean, that's
talk about the whole thing, all of it. Yeah.
Yes, we could definitely talk about.
Can we talk OJ too?
Yes, we can talk OJ. We can talk OJ.
OJ is my favorite case ever.
And Morgan wants to talk Al Capone.
Yeah,
Listen, I
that's
watched his
dude,
vault.
Al Capone
I watched
is.
his vault get open, and nothing was in it.
Yeah.
Poor
Al Capone
Geraldo.
is very interesting, like his story, and the guys that escaped out of Alcatraz is a great story too. Like that is a great story. Um, and you know what's funny, Andrew? Bumpy Johnson is connected to that Alcatraz story too. Like if
Oh,
we
really?
could talk about, yeah, we could talk about that. Yeah, yeah,
That's crazy.
that movie, Escape from Alcatraz. I read the book, but the movie is great.
Hmm.
You guys make sure you follow him and follow his YouTube. It's what is it? Bulletz Gotti 2.0.
Yes, the Bulletz Gotti Show 2.0. Yes, yes. I thank you guys for inviting me, Andrew, Jen,
Thank
Amy.
you.
I appreciate you guys, and definitely, y'all can follow my TikTok. This was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and like I said, anytime we could do this, and we could do this again, man. Just let me know, Andrew.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. We appreciate it.
And,
Thank you so
and
much.
and don't forget, I would love to come talk law.
Oh yeah, sure. We could definitely do that on my channel, Amy. Whenever you're ready, just let me know. We could definitely talk law. Andrew, you can pull
Listen,
up.
I teach at nighttime. Outside of that, I mean, I only teach at nighttime on Mondays and Tuesdays this upcoming semester. But other than that, anytime you want, I'm available to talk because I want to help with keeping down those rates. I want to keep people from being in the institution and being a part of the corrupt system.
Yep, sure. We can definitely do that. But I'm gonna let you guys know. I thank y'all for letting me come. This was a great show. I appreciate it. I gotta learn how to do this TikTok thing, Andrew. You gotta show me. I like it.
That's
It's kind of
easy.
cool. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
it's definitely fun. I'm still learning too. I just went live for the first time today with Jonathan Cruz, the Vice Lord I was telling you about. That has a three
Oh yeah,
bodies in
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Indiana.
yeah. I remember you told me about him. Yeah, you told me about him. Hey, I still couldn't get the Taco Bell killer yet, man.
Oh, really? Henry Wallace? Yeah, he's an asshole. He's either with you or he's not with you. He's not nice.
Yeah, that guy's crazy. That guy's crazy. But I would say good night to you guys, man. I appreciate you
Good
guys.
night.
All
All
right,
right,
you
thank
Yes,
you.
thank
Appreciate it.
you.
you have a good one.
All right, you too.